Hey everyone, today I wanted to discuss the problems with DBD's various game modes. They're still a relatively new thing considering they started coming out a little over a year ago and since then have always been a bit of a problem. So today I want to go through each of my core problems with Dead by Daylight's alternate game modes. Let's get into it. The core problem I have with the modes, and particularly 2v8, is the disruption it causes to the core game, mainly in the form of queue times. It's become especially bad I think with each iteration of 2v8 as more and more people just simply don't want to play Survivor. It's gotten to the point where the Survivor queue in 2v8 feels largely like a killer waiting line, a role people reluctantly play in favour of literally sitting in the lobby for the next 20 minutes or however long. And it affects the queue time so badly for killer that we have a play whilst you wait feature now for 1v4. And whilst I do appreciate this feature and do find it to be a lifesaver, it's really rough when you just want to hop on and play a bit of killer during this mode. Not even 2v8, just general 1v4 killer. Only to wait a minimum of 5 minutes for regular queue, or like 20 for 2v8. It messes with the people who don't even want to interact with 2v8, and it lasts quite a substantial 3 weeks. The core issue with this though, that many have pointed out before, is that they essentially just made a mode that's too much fun for the killer side, and unique enough that people always want to play it when it comes around. So I have a few ideas that I think would genuinely aid queue times, and I think the core of fixing these times is by making the Survivor role more appealing and engaging, where currently it feels like somewhat of an afterthought. Killer is the draw of 2v8, and then Survivor is just kinda there. There are simple fixes I think, like adding a greater BP incentive for Survivor, like genuinely knocking on a 10x multiplier just to make queues more bearable for the few weeks it's active, although I think this would only work to some extent, honestly. The issue with the Survivor role in 2v8 isn't that it's not rewarding enough, as you already get a 3.5x multiplier at base, and the games are quick, giving you lots of BP. The core issue is that the majority of players don't enjoy it. I can attest to this too. With a group of people, it can be a lot of fun. I got together a team of 8 on stream and we made unified Survivor looks, all dressing up as Resident Evil characters, and then Stranger Things, and then we were all blue, and then red, and so on. It was a lot of fun, but this is only really fun if you can get that many people, and even then it loses its charm fairly quickly. Playing 2v8 solo queue is quite miserable, at least on Survivor, and you constantly get ignored by teammates. Take this game for example I played with Monstrous Sneeze, where he got hooked in the first 30 seconds of the match, and no other teammate went for the save until he was around 10 seconds remaining on his cage. That's wild, but your teammates don't care. So the core issue with this is that Survivor needs to be more engaging to play. Survivors need something to do, and it can't be something as simple or straightforward as the tonics, which really don't shake up gameplay enough. I think Survivor for one needs perks. Perks are already and essentially what gives the role more depth and also options. The current pre-made classes are fine for killer, as there is more of a draw for 2v8 killer, but for Survivor they make the role even more shallow, which is a problem. My suggestion is that you can keep the classes, but depending on the class you run, you gain access to perks that belong to that class. For example, you select Medic and you can run 4 altruistic or healing based perks from a pool. Then Escapist gives you access to all running or boldness type perks, and so on for all the classes. This added depth with the perks would make a huge difference I think, and so much more build variety. Next I want to suggest introducing alternate mechanics or objectives into 2v8 to shake things up. Add something similar to blood generators, where survivors are tasked with doing something a little bit different than the usual holding M1, and occasionally hitting a skill check. Introduce generators that first need a part to be picked up, carried across the map, and affixed before a gen can be completed. This would require greater teamwork from the survivors and would make the role more engaging and high stakes, if you have to carry this high value item across the entire map without getting hit. Provide survivors with opportunities for potential advantages by allowing multiple to gather in the basement for example and perform an invocation. Allow survivors who are in pairs to lift up dropped pallets together, rewarding them for their teamwork, and allowing unique interactions to happen. Put unique and special items exclusive to 2v8 inside of the chests to incentivize looting and the exciting possibility of getting a cool new item like a droppable cryo bomb or a tripwire of some kind. A fog vial that blankets the whole map in fog for 15 seconds or something. Just some wild items that feel rewarding to get but are also hard to get. All of these things I think would make Survivor infinitely more fun and would actually get people to want to play Survivor for the unique moments and interactions and possibility of of using cool and unique items only accessible in this mode for 3 weeks. Maybe even add items that have exclusive cosmetic looks to them, which can be retrieved from 2v8 and used in regular modes afterwards. Add a tangible reward to Survivor gameplay, but also specifically for surviving, to encourage people to actually play as well. Lack of variety is the next big one, and honestly maybe the most confusing too. In the past year we've been relegated to essentially just 2 modes, Chaos Shuffle and 2v8, and that's it. Whilst 2024 didn't have that many more, it did have both Lights Out and My Little Loney, the extremely brief April Fool's mode of that year. Lights Out was not present at all last year though. This isn't necessarily a bad thing either, because to be honest I didn't like Lights Out that much and did find it rather boring, even when it was spruced up with the Castlevania variant of it. My assumption for its lack of return is that it simply didn't perform well on the back end of things. Player numbers and interest were low presumably, whereas I know when 2v8 comes out the player number count spikes. However, just because this is the case does not mean every other mode aside 2v8 and Chaos Shuffle should be shelved, because it gets really boring honestly just rotating these two, and it also leads to them feeling a bit too frequent, where once I would have been excited for a spurt of 2v8 or Chaos Shuffle, I feel just whelmed by them nowadays, or actively dread 2v8 and how it's going to mess up killer queues for the next couple weeks. The thing is too, there's so much potential for modes to be added, and even ones that have existed before, such as in the mobile version of the game. Game modes like Prop Hunt, which realistically might have the opposite issue of Survivor queue times being too long, as the majority of people probably want to be in the prop role. This is much more preferable though, I'd argue, as there's an excess of Survivor players, so it wouldn't matter as much compared to a mode like 2v8. Other modes that could be really interesting to see are first person modes, as in a mode where survivors run around in first person as well as the killer. Or potentially you go for a flipped perspective mode where killers go third person and survivors forced to first. An OG Dead by Daylight mode would be cool too, where you're transported back to 2016 DBD and it's got wild balance and a smaller pool of perks and killers. That would be awesome. A 1v1 mode where the game starts at shack and ends once the killer has downed a survivor. Add in a leaderboard too and it would make for a fun community event where everyone can compete for either the longest chase or the fastest down for killers. Lights Out could return but potentially gear more toward horror and the jump scare factor by making the game even darker and featuring only maps with tight corners and close proximity. This game is already such a sandbox, but it feels the potential is being really limited to just 2v8 and Chaos Shuffle. Even with Chaos Shuffle, I wish it could be more chaotic. It's called Chaos Shuffle after all, yet we have bans on certain add-on combinations and such. It's called Chaos Shuffle, it should be chaotic. There is such a wide variety of possibility when it comes to DBD and modes, and it feels like truly only a fraction of this possibility has been explored. Despite the past year really being fairly open to new modes, especially with the influx of new players with the FNAF chapter, now would be a great time to display the versatility of the game and show off the possibilities it has beyond the regular 1v4 mode, 2v8 and Chaos Shuffle. And I do love these modes. Again, I don't want to just sound like I'm simply complaining, because that's not what this is. Those modes are valuable ones to keep in rotation, but there needs to be more than just 2, I think, because it gets really boring after the 3rd or 4th time, especially when they're just taking in turns alternating, and last up to 3 weeks at a time, which sorta leads on to my next problem with the modes. Exclusivity, I think, is another issue that these modes have a problem with. In general, I don't understand why the alternate game modes can't be present in custom games. This would make them always available for people who wanted them, and allow groups to come together and play 2v8 or Chaos Shuffle, or maybe even the benched modes like Lights Out or My Little Loney, and do it on their own time and with their own rule sets. The current exclusivity of the modes causes them to always get imbalanced numbers of players coming into the game, at least in 2v8's case to be fair, not so much with Chaos Shuffle. Whilst a huge player spike for the game is amazing of course, as stated before it whacks the entire thing out of balance. The killer queue time upticks exponentially. So a simple fix to the exclusivity problem is to just put the modes in custom games. Even if they're a bit janky and buggy, I don't think people will mind really, because it's customs and they'll be messing around for fun without BP incentive with some buddies. So I think just whack it in there, worst case after a patch or 2 it's kinda buggy. But again, I really don't think it matters all that much. It's just nice to have this option or feature, especially if you could play the mode against or with bots on your own. You could just choose to do this if you don't care for playing against real people but enjoy the mode, or to practice or whatever. Chaos Shuffle as a mode especially feels odd that it's not a permanent fixture to some level. Whilst I don't think a permanent alternate mode is a good idea, as queue times would surely be way too messed with, I do think a good idea is to partially implement things like Chaos Shuffle's perk randomization. Why is it not possible to just run random perks for yourself if you you want to, without a third-party random perk generator. I want to have a selectable randomizer perk that I can click, and it makes it so when I run it in one slot, or all four, or however many, it gives me a random perk from the pool I own, allowing me to play Chaos Shuffle whenever I like if I please. I like to do this basically anyway, but it would be a greatly appreciated quality of life feature if this could just be selectable in the lobby, and without the need for Chaos Shuffle to actually be active. I'm not a believer in any mode being permanently active, despite some cries for this, and that's because it would undoubtedly lead to the first problem I covered of there constantly being queue time issues, largely for the killer side. Chaos Shuffle, again, isn't as bad, but it still splits the queue when it's active. The same goes for all modes. The other part of exclusivity, I think, should be that the mode should run no longer than 2 weeks. If the queue times can be fixed, then there's really no reason for a limited mode to be running for 3 weeks time, I think. With 2v8 and Chaos Shuffle often being introduced as just being 2 weeks long, but then almost always getting an additional week tacked on. This time around it's been established that it's just 3 weeks long, which is nice. I do appreciate that. When it has been extended in the past though, it has been quite annoying, quite frankly, if you're getting bored of the modes and want things to go back to normal, and then you hear, oh, there's another week. Especially if there's just been a huge event or something too. It can lead to periods of DBD where there's always something going on. In some ways it's a huge positive, but in others it can just feel like you want some normality for a while, and not to have a constant rotating door of game modes or events. As stated before, this wouldn't be so much of a problem though if the game modes were a lot more differentiated, and we didn't get the same two over and over, as that is partly what leads to the burnout, I think. My final two problems are fairly small. The first of these two is a lack of change within the modes. I think this is most evident in Chaos Shuffle actually, where almost every iteration of the mode has been essentially the exact same, just offering a randomization to perks. And even the last Chaos Shuffle, where we finally got add-on randomization too, there were some that were banned. I personally don't get the point of this. In a game mode, as prior mentioned, to be called Chaos Shuffle. Chaos is the whole purpose, no? I would love if Chaos Shuffle could be truly chaotic. Random everything, perks, add-ons, character choice, and even cosmetics could be completely messed up and randomized. Make the chaos worth it. For 2v8 it's a similar deal where barely anything changes from variation to variation. Across the course of its 8 versions it feels barely different from its first iteration. The only significant change I can think of is the added killers and a few classes. Killers is great and all, but it's a slow addition process with even some removals like Legion. And then for Survivor, as discussed, the classes just aren't enough to keep it interesting. Therefore 2v8 from variant to variant feels barely different each time. The best versions of 2v8 in my opinion as well have been the ones like the Resident Evil themed one, where we got a significant killer drop, but then also a whole new herb mechanic as well, that fit in with the mode. Whilst not perfect, this felt fairly substantial for the time, compared to the most recent version, which feels barely different to be honest. And a mechanic like the herbs gets old pretty fast, now in the form of tonics. The final problem with these modes, I think, and one that unifies all of these problems together, is the imbalance between the two sides of Survivor and Killer. It's the tough task this game has of making modes that are not only enjoyable, but ones that both sides are going to like and play equally. I think it's actually why Chaos Shuffle works. Is because the mode facilitates both sides equally and doesn't really favour one over the other, but instead gives each side a clear and simple incentive to play. Also, Chaos Shuffle is essentially just 1v4 with random perks, so I also think that's why it's so accessible. 2v8 on the other hand has the problem where there is complete imbalance between sides. Future modes need to keep this in mind, where both sides need an equal incentive to want to play as both Survivor and Killer. Otherwise this will just happen again, and we'll undoubtedly have more modes in the future where one side is clearly favoured. Alright, well that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts about DBD's various game modes down below. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.